Welcome to this video about an introduction to SLCN, part 2 of 4, Identifying Signs. Some initial considerations. SLCN and indicators and traits of SLCN are common within schools. We can think of SLCN and some other areas of difficulty as a higher incidence SEN. Pupils with a range of intellectual abilities can have speech, language and communication needs. And SLCN can affect pupils in different ways. There are many variables. Sometimes it can be difficult to identify any obvious signs of SLCN. Often SLCN is a hidden difficulty, especially when the pupil's expressive language is age appropriate. A good indication of the severity and persistence of SLCN type difficulties can be gained by monitoring how a pupil responds to classroom-based strategies and intervention. Identifying needs is a process, not an event. It is entwined with teaching, support and intervention as part of the graduated approach. Do we need a speech and language therapist to identify SLCN? SLCN can only be formally assessed and identified by a speech and language therapist. However, in this video, we are not focusing on the formal assessment or labeling of SLCN, but on the identification of signs of SLCN within the graduated approach as part of the school's routine SEN processes and provisions. How do speech and language skills develop? Patterns of language development. Speech and language development often follows a set pattern. There are recognized developmental norms. Some children will follow the same pattern, but at a reduced rate. Language delay. This is often easier to support in school as the next steps follow a predictable pattern. Some children may be erratic in their development. They may have a spiky profile and have gaps in any area or at any point. They may need some additional support and input from a speech and language therapist to know the next steps. Developmental language disorder, DLD, is a term for children whose language is not on track and is the primary difficulty after the age of 5. Research suggests that by this stage, these children may need significant additional support to progress or get on track with language. For some children, this will be a lifelong condition. Milestone posters. Milestone posters are an accessible reference. Here are some examples. How we can use the Milestones posters. You can look at the poster for the pupil's relevant phase. You could identify a pupil who you are concerned about. For that pupil, you can look at which age band they fall into for the different areas of language on this poster. Speech sounds. What to expect when. Another resource which is very helpful, particularly in primary schools, is the Sound Development Checklist. Around 90% of children can use these sounds in single words by the ages given. Red flags. Speech and language skills develop from a very early age. However, as we know, some children do not develop the early skills they need. These can be very difficult to spot from an early age. There are red flags for concern to be aware of, which are useful to share with staff and parents and carers. Let's take a quick look. Here are 2 examples for different age groups. Here is an iceberg infographic which can help us to understand the hidden difficulties a pupil with speech and language needs might experience. Masking behaviours. What might it look like in the classroom, in primary school? Some words that primary teachers use to describe how speech, language and communication needs might present in the classroom. What might it look like in the classroom, secondary? Some words that secondary teachers use to describe how speech, language and communication needs might present in the classroom. What might teachers and teaching assistants notice in lessons that could indicate possible SLCN? 1. Understanding language. May give irrelevant answers or not respond to questions. May have difficulty understanding implied meaning. Difficulty following instructions and directions, and misunderstanding multi-step questions. Listening and attention. Difficulty concentrating or easily distracted, and difficulties with self-organization and attention. Storytelling and narrative. May find common sequences hard to remember, for example, days of the week. May have difficulty retelling events and stories or making up their own stories. And narratives may be shorter, may not be organized or coherent, and may include irrelevances. What might teachers and teaching assistants notice in lessons that could indicate possible SLCN? 2. Understanding and using vocabulary. May have a limited range of vocabulary or difficulty learning new vocabulary. May use the wrong words or made up words. May overuse general words, e.g. thingy and that. And may use a lot of fillers or hesitations, for example, and Word finding difficulties and memory. Difficulty holding on to and manipulating information. May struggle to retrieve words from memory. Sentences. May have difficulty with using well-formed and longer sentences. May make errors or miss out pronouns and tense markers. May mix up the word order, making spoken language difficult to understand. May have difficulty with hypothesizing and predicting. And may rely on pointing and gestures to get across their message. What might teachers and teaching assistants notice in lessons that could indicate possible SLCN? 3. Speech. May have difficulty producing specific sounds, substitutes sounds, and misses off parts of words. May have poor phonological awareness, and may have speech processing difficulties such as sequencing multisyllabic words. Stammering. May repeat sounds or parts of words. May prolong sounds. They may block sounds, for example, no sounds come out. And may have tension in their face or make extra movements. Voice. May have an unusual voice quality, for example, hoarse, husky, breathy, rough or weak. May lose their voice or it cuts out while speaking. What might teachers and teaching assistants notice in lessons that could indicate possible SLCN? 4. Social interaction and play. May find it difficult to understand and discuss their own or other people's feelings. May find it difficult to see things from another person's point of view. May find it difficult to start, join in, and maintain conversations. For example, they may interrupt or give too much information, or may switch topic without signal or persevere on a favoured topic. May find it difficult to understand and use non-verbal communication. For example, body language, eye contact, personal space, and tone of voice. And they may not understand non-literal language, for example, jokes, idioms, and metaphors. Information within the school that is routinely available from teachers. Teachers and teaching assistants can spot pupils who are presenting with possible SLCN in their lessons. Additional sources of teacher-held and class-based evidence includes attainment and progress data for subjects studied, pupil observation feedback, we will look at this in a moment, behaviour and engagement data and information, pupil work samples, and views provided by the pupil and or their parents and carers during meetings. Considering other and additional needs and factors at an early point. Overall level of development. A pupil may have SLCN as part of a wider developmental delay. Therefore, it's important to look at their general learning profile. We may expect their language skills to be in line with the rest of their development. Were there gaps in the pupil's education history? Hearing impairment. Hearing is critical for the development of speech and language skills, so it's important to find out whether the pupil has had a hearing check or history of glue ear. Working memory. Working memory has a significant impact on learning across the curriculum and within social opportunities. Poor working memory capacity is a common feature of DLD, but it's also a specific learning difficulty that can stand alone, or be a feature of other types of SEN, for example dyslexia, ADHD, and autism. Links to specific learning difficulties. Language consists of 4 interacting subcomponents: phonology, semantics, syntax, and pragmatics. Preschool children with delayed language are at increased risk of developing literacy difficulties. The phonological processing difficulties of pupils with dyslexia may therefore be considered a language difficulty and vice versa. There is strong evidence of an overlap between DLD and dyslexia, a form of specific learning difficulty, SPLD. If the articulation of words and sounds are inaccurate and full of errors, then spelling also becomes very problematic for the child. Links to social communication and SEMH needs. As we know, autistic pupils have difficulties with social communication and interaction. There are also a range of SEMH type needs which may require exploration. Selective mutism, for example, is an emotional disorder in which affected children and young people speak fluently in some situations, but remain silent in others. No single cause has been established, but emotional, psychological, and social factors may influence its development. Research points to a strong association with social anxiety. English as an additional language, EAL. EAL is not a type of SLCN or any type of SEN. In fact, it can be an advantage in many ways. A few key points to bear in mind. Quiet phases are normal in the first 6 months. Code switching is normal. It is helpful for parents and other family members to speak and read to their child in their home language, as a solid foundation in their first language is crucial for building further language skills. It can take between 2 and 5 years for a pupil learning EAL to develop English at a social level, and 5 to 7 years at an academic level. A pupil with SLCN will have difficulties in all of their languages. To establish whether there is possible SEN, it is essential to gather wider information about the pupil. For example, do the family have concerns about their child's communication and understanding in their home language? How do they play, interact, or communicate at home and outside of home? Can they access their other languages? Things to consider during pupil observations. Does the pupil look and give good eye contact? Watch, follow, copy, and imitate others. Play parallel, cooperatively, and symbolically. Approach others to initiate interaction. Take turns in play or conversations. Have difficulties following the rules of conversation. In class, does the pupil contribute to class, group, and paired discussions? Follow instructions and do visuals help? Use a wide variety of vocabulary. Join words together to make short phrases. And retell a narrative easily, make a story or event. Staff can use the checklists to guide their observation of the pupil. Using checklists. If you are starting to develop a hypothesis that a pupil may have SLCN, and/or if you are coordinating the early identification of needs in other areas of SEND, for example SPLD, ADHD, etc., you may feel that it's now appropriate to use one or more SEN checklists. Checklists are a list of statements or questions that seek to identify a pattern of traits or difficulties based on the responses given. Whilst SEN checklists are somewhat subjective, and they rely on the individual completing them, for example a teacher, to understand the questions and statements and to respond honestly, they do provide a useful early step towards identification. SLCN checklists provide the opportunity for a pupil's pattern of performance to be reviewed against typical development. Examples of initial SLCN checklists. Using SLCN screeners. Screening for SLCN involves using a commercially available screening tool. Screeners are a cost-effective method that can assist with identification, but they are not a substitute for a formal speech and language therapy assessment. They often provide an indication of the pupil's areas of strengths and weaknesses. Consider whether the screener misses any areas, for example, speech sounds. Results need to be interpreted by carefully considering all other sources of information, data, and school-based evidence. Screeners can be completed again once an intervention has taken place to help measure progress and decide on next steps. And all good screeners should have undergone some level of standardization and testing to ensure the accuracy of results. Talking with the pupil and their parents or carers. At this point, you have collated a range of school-based evidence. SENCOs, staff members within the SEN team, or class teachers may feel that it would be helpful to discuss their concerns with the pupil, if age appropriate, and their parents or carers. This could include a review of the available school-based evidence. It can be useful to refer to the typical talk milestones posters. It can also be helpful to gently explore when their child started to talk, and whether there's any known family history of SLCN. Other possible areas of need might also need to be discussed. It is important to reassure parents of the classroom strategies and any additional provision which can be provided to support the pupil's possible needs. Transition from primary to secondary school. If a pupil has previously had a history of SLCN, it's important to share this with the secondary school, so this can be considered if the pupil starts to develop SEMH-type needs as they get older. Sometimes, leading up to the transition from primary school to secondary school, information may be shared that indicates a profile of possible SLCN that have not been further explored. It can be helpful to rapidly gather the types of routine school-based evidence we've been discussing so far in this video, wherever possible, and to meet with the pupil, their parents and carers, and make use of a simple checklist, if appropriate. This is the end of this video. Parts 3 and 4 on this topic are now available to watch. You can view more videos on this channel in the About series.